Is that the sound of a flag rope clicking? Or just another morning being ignored? The hall lights hummed and someone scoffed, said the janitor still carried himself like command. Still, the mop water shimmered under the window stripes, the brass badge glinting once before silence pressed against him, heavy, like respect withheld. Then the floor caught the dawn. Heartbeat reflection and memory aligned. He bent to pick up the proof no one asked for. Anyway, quiet men leave echoes too. The janitor's cart rolled across the empty hall, its wheels squeaking in the hush before sunrise. The mop water shimmered faintly, catching the flag stripes from the window like a moving reflection of memory, red, white, and a long breath of blue. Harrison slowed his back stiff from years of early mornings. He adjusted the badge that hung from the handle, small brass polished to habit. The light caught it again, a quiet glint that almost seemed to breathe. "Morning, sir." The voice came from Darlene, the waitress from the diner next door, carrying a tray of paper cups. "Smells like pine soap and duty in here." She smiled. He nodded once. "Old habits. Can't clean half a hall." Before he could say more, footsteps echoed a heavier rhythm. Director Walcott appeared in the doorway, coat already pressed clipboard under arm. His voice was the kind that announced itself before it reached you. "Harrison." The single word scraped the silence. "We talked about this. The flag display, remove it after the ceremony. And that pin," he gestured toward the cart, "that's not regulation janitor gear." The pause that followed could have filled the whole corridor. "You're not in uniform anymore, sir." The words landed soft but sharp, like dust settling after a strike. Darlene stopped midway through setting the cups, eyes flicking between them. Harrison didn't answer. He reached for the mop handle, steadying himself. "No, I'm not," he said finally, his tone radio calm. "But the floor doesn't know that." A thin breath of humor passed through the hall, then vanished. Walcott muttered something about protocol and turned away his shoes, tapping like punctuation marks across the tiles. The light shifted again. The flag reflection trembled in the puddle and broke into ripples. Harrison bent, wrung the mop, and as he did, the badge slid loose, hit the edge of the cart, caught the first beam of morning, and glowed. He looked at it a moment longer than needed. Then without a word, he picked it up and slipped it into his pocket. Darlene watched, saying nothing. The hum of the old ceiling fan filled the space where voices had been. "Coffee'll be on the table," she said softly. "Guess heroes still need caffeine." "Guess so," he replied, faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He turned back to the bucket. The flag's reflection had steadied again, as if waiting for the next order. He dipped the mop and traced slow lines across the floor, red meeting white, white meeting blue, until everything blurred together. Still, the badge in his pocket felt heavier than before, metal remembering a name no one spoke. Somewhere beyond the hall doors, a choir was beginning its morning rehearsal. The voices, muffled by distance, rose like the echo of something unfinished. He straightened, leaned on the handle, and looked toward the far wall, where a patch of light was spreading. "Clean start," he murmured. And for a heartbeat, the hall glowed as if it believed him. The hall always sounded larger after sunset, just the mop swishing the hum of old lights, and the faint voice of a radio drifting from the supply room. An old march played low, scratched by static like memory coming through dust. Harrison moved slow, measured the rhythm of someone who'd learned to stretch time when no one was watching. The mop handle leaned against the bucket, the brass badge now hanging from it like a tired metal. It caught the radio glow every few seconds, flashing its dull salute. The side door creaked. Evenin' Mr. H. Noah stepped in 20 if a day hair untamed jacket too light for November. He carried 2 steaming cups and a grin that didn't yet know what to hide. "Darlene said you'd still be here." Guess I am, Harrison said, rinsing the mop. Place doesn't clean itself. Noah set a cup on the cart. Black right. No sugar. You remembered. Hard to forget. You said sugar ruins discipline. Sounds like me, Harrison said, and finally allowed a hint of a smile. They stood in easy quiet. The mop bucket gurgled and the march ended with a crack of static. Man, this place gives me the creeps at night, Noah said. Echoes too much. Like it's listening. It remembers, Harrison replied. Remembers what? He didn't answer. Just moved the mop again, slow circles on the polished tile. The reflection of ceiling lights trembled under each pass. Noah leaned on the broom handle, studying the badge. Hey, what's this? He plucked it gently, reading the worn engraving. Service Award, Maintenance Division. Then he chuckled. Janitor of the Year. The laugh wasn't cruel, just young, but it still hit something hollow. Harrison didn't flinch. He looked up, calm as radio tone. Maybe he said, Depends on the year. Noah's grin faded, unsure if he'd crossed a line. The silence after felt wider than the hall. Sorry, he muttered. Didn't mean anything. I know. The mop handle squeaked as Harrison turned it upright. The badge swung once, catching a fragment of ceiling light before going still. Funny thing about metals, Harrison added. They shine just the same no matter who's holding the handle. The boy nodded, eyes on the floor. Guess so, and a minute passed, the kind that doesn't need filling, but the floor kept its shine. Noah wandered toward the far wall where old photographs lined a corkboard, black and white smiles, handshakes, parades long over. His hand stopped at one, the corner of a frame, chipped glass, clouded with time. Inside, a younger man, same jaw, same calm shoulders, uniform pressed flag behind him. Pinned to his chest, the same badge. Hey, Noah whispered. That's you. Harrison didn't turn. Depends on the year, he said again, voice low, almost fond. The radio clicked as if on cue, shifting to a softer tune, a hymn, or maybe just static in harmony. Noah looked once more at the photo, then at the man mopping the same stretch of floor, and something like respect crossed his face. The badge swayed once more on the handle, catching the dim light before the scene faded. Morning rain had left streaks on the post office windows, thin silver threads against gray light. Harrison stood in line with a brown envelope under one arm, the other hand resting on his mop handle like a cane. The hall's notice still echoed in his mind, exhibit removal for modern art renovation. The words had felt like erasing, not progress. Martha from the diner was ahead of him, counting out change for stamps. They're taking down the veteran wall, you hear, she said without turning. Said it's clutter. Clutter. After all them photos folks brought in. Guess times change, Harrison murmured. Change is one thing, she snapped. Forgettin's another. He gave a small nod, the kind that meant he agreed, but wouldn't add kindling to the fire. The post office clerk, a man in a neat blue vest, glanced up, witness by accident. Morning, Mr. H., the clerk said softly. Heard they'll move the plaques to storage. Temporary, maybe. Maybe, Harrison said. But things boxed too long tend to stay boxed. Martha slid her stamps away. If I were you, I'd give that council a word or two. They don't run on words, he said. They run on minutes and motions. By afternoon, the council meeting filled the small chamber behind the library. Folding chairs, microphones squeak, rain pattering against the windows. Harrison waited near the back, his envelope tucked close. When he finally rose to speak, his voice carried more steadiness than anger. That wall isn't art, he said. It's a memory that pays rent on this town's decency. He didn't get further. Sir, you're not on the docket, the chair interrupted. We'll note your concern in the minutes. The gavel struck like a polite muzzle. Conversation turned elsewhere, funding paint deadlines. Outrage didn't shout in him. It settled heavy and private. He stepped outside, rain brushing his coat. The post office clerk happened by, again, umbrella tilting toward him. They didn't let you talk. They heard enough, Harrison replied. Sometimes hearing isn't listening, the clerk said. If you need someone to sign a petition, appreciate it, Harrison said. Maybe later. The man nodded, a quiet recruit in the chain of witnesses. By night, the hall was empty again. The echo of his mop along the floor was softer tonight, a rhythm for thought, not labor. He stopped by the locker room, the hum of fluorescence flickering overhead. Inside the small metal cubby sat the badge resting on a folded rag. Light from the fixture caught its surface, throwing a reflection up onto the locker door, a warped mirror of the emblem, and his face beside it. He closed the door gently, the click small but final. Then the lights flickered over the empty plaques. Outside, rain streaked the glass like slow applause, each drop carrying the glint of that brass reflection, until the hallway dimmed again. The hall looked different under ceremony lights, too clean, too bright. Blue gels washed the floor until it glowed like ice. Rows of folding chairs filled with townspeople, a small brass band warming up near the door. Above them, the flag hung perfectly still, untouched by breeze or doubt. Harrison worked the mop along the edge of the crowd, invisible as routine. His badge was back on the cart, polished without thinking. Each pass caught the cold light like a watchful eye. Walcott was everywhere, checking schedules, whispering at volunteers, timing the speeches down to the second. The man believed in order, and order believed in him. "Keep the aisle clear," he called. "No wandering, please." "Just mopping," Harrison said quietly. "Then mop somewhere else." The remark drew polite laughter from a few in uniform. Darlene, balancing the coffee tray again, shot Harrison an apologetic glance. Noah stood by the sidewall, camera in hand, unsure where to focus. The brass band struck a shaky note. A hush fell, not silence, just the breath before ceremony. Then the side doors opened. Colonel Grant entered, wheelchair rolling slow, pushed by the post office clerk. The audience stood automatically. Walcott adjusted his tie and stepped forward. "Colonel Grant," he said, voice bright, "we're honored you could join us. Let's begin with the pledge." "Wait." The colonel's voice carried dry but deliberate. His eyes had fixed on the janitor's cart. The badge had slipped from its hook and fallen onto the polished tile, spinning once before coming to rest at Harrison's feet. Light caught the engraving, sent it flickering up across the colonel's lap. "Where did you get that?" the old man asked. "Found it on the floor," Walcott replied too quickly. "Probably just a keepsake from the maintenance team." But the colonel's gaze never moved from Harrison. The room waited. "Son," the colonel said, quiet but edged with something heavier. "What's your name, Harrison, sir?" A pause long enough for every heartbeat in the hall to count itself. "Not your first name," the colonel said. "Your rank." The silence slammed into him, a ceremony without music. Darlene stopped pouring coffee. Noah lowered the camera. Walcott shifted in place, clipboard trembling slightly. Harrison took a breath that felt 20 years deep. "Was he said?" "Chief Petty Officer. Retired." The colonel nodded, once the kind of nod that closes ranks. "Didn't retire from honor, though." "Did you?" Harrison shook his head. "No, sir. Just from payroll." A small ripple went through the crowd, half surprise, half respect. Walcott tried to resume control papers fluttering in his hand. "We're short on time." "You're short on memory," the colonel said, eyes still on Harrison. It wasn't anger, it was correction. The kind that didn't need volume to land. This man, the colonel continued, trained my unit in discipline and grace. He kept men alive by example, not orders. Walcott swallowed. "I didn't realize." "You didn't look," Darlene said, her voice steady from the crowd. Noah lifted the camera again, now recording. The lens caught the moment, the badge gleaming between two generations of veterans, one standing by a mop, one seated by history. The colonel reached down. The clerk handed him the fallen badge. His fingers, thin and trembling, polished the surface once with his thumb, then extended it toward Harrison. "Yours," he said. "Still shines, doesn't it?" "It remembers," Harrison answered. "Then let it keep doing so." The badge passed from one hand to the other, small as a token, heavy as proof. Someone in the back began to clap, stopped halfway. The colonel raised his palm, no applause. "Respect doesn't need noise," he murmured. Harrison nodded, slipping the badge over the mop handle again, his own ceremony of service. Noah zoomed in for the shot, the brass catching light, the colonel's reflection mirrored within it. The camera trembled once, like it knew it was witnessing something final. Across the hall, the flag's folds shifted in the air conditioning. The crowd didn't move. For a moment, everything held sound breath recognition before the band began again, softer this time in the key of memory. The light faded just as the whisper lingered, "Sir." Morning light eased through the hall windows, warmer than the day before. The air smelled faintly of polish and coffee, a sign that the volunteers had been busy. Where the empty plaques once hung, a new memorial board gleamed oak frame brass letters, and at its center, the badge. The engraving had been cleaned so carefully that every curve caught the light like a quiet anthem. Beneath it, a small card read, "Integrity first, service without ceremony." Harrison stood off to the side, hands in pockets, watching the workers finish taping cords and aligning chairs. Walcott approached slowly, no clipboard this time, just a folded program. "Mr. Harrison," he began, voice lower than usual, "I owe you an apology." Harrison tilted his head, saying nothing. "I thought I was protecting the image of the hall," Walcott went on. "Turns out, it already had one worth protecting." A pause settled between them, the kind of silence that repairs instead of punishes. "Wasn't personal," Harrison said. "Didn't feel personal till you made it right." Walcott nodded, faint smile flickering and fading like a test of humility passed. Across the room, Darlene set a fresh coffee tray on the bench by the door. "Figured we'd start the day right," she said. "Real coffee this time, not that council blend." Noah lifted his camera lens, glinting under the morning glow. "Mind if I film?" "Only if you catch my good side," she replied. He grinned. Hard to miss. The small joke earned a round of soft laughter, easing the stiffness of the morning. The choir children gathered near the board, rehearsing for the reopening. One of them, a girl no older than 12, looked up at the badge. "Do I read the words?" she asked the director. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Her voice, high but steady, filled the hall, integrity first. "Service without ceremony." Something about the way she said it made everyone stand a little straighter. Martha entered from the side door, wiping her hands on an apron dusted with flour. "Well," she said, surveying the board, "guess the shine finally paid off." A ripple of smiles moved through the room, not laughter exactly, but the kind of shared warmth that turns relief into memory. The band tuned in softly, playing the same hymn that had stumbled through the last ceremony. This time every note found its place. Noah panned the camera slowly. Darlene by the bench, Walcott at the doorway. The colonel's empty wheelchair angled toward the light, and Harrison standing behind it. Hands folded, eyes on the badge. The overhead lights brightened in sequence, each one adding warmth until the floor gleamed again. Still, no one spoke loudly. Outside, the rain had stopped. Through the open doors, sunlight rolled across the steps and slid into the hall, filling it like forgiveness. For a brief moment, every reflection on the floor, coffee cups, camera lens, brass plaque, shimmered together as one image, bright and unhurried. Then the lights steadied and the hall exhaled. The hall woke before the town did. Soft gold light slid through the tall windows, cutting across rows of chairs now empty again. The flag above them barely moved, the air too still for wind. Harrison swept in long, even strokes. Dust rose, spun briefly in sunlight, then disappeared like the week's noise settling back into silence. The badge now hung framed beneath the memorial plaque, its brass edges still catching light even when nothing moved. The radio hummed from the supply room, choir voices faint and unhurried. It sounded less like music and more like memory rehearsing itself. He paused by the bench where the coffee tray had stood yesterday. Only 2 paper cups remained, each leaving a ring on the polished wood. He wiped them gently away, not to erase, but to make space for the next story that would start here. The doors creaked. Morning Mr. H. Noah stepped inside, jingling the keyring in his hand. His jacket was zipped high collar up against the chill. "Didn't expect you this early," Harrison said. "Boss told me to lock up for the holiday," Noah replied. "Didn't want to do it without saying thanks." "For what? For showing what doing right looks like," the boy said, a little awkward, a little proud. Harrison smiled faintly, leaning on the broom handle. "You'll learn it's mostly sweeping, just quieter." They stood a moment, the kind of pause that says everything words would only weaken. The choir on the radio reached the soft part of the hymn, the notes stretching into the corners of the hall. "Colonel asked about you yesterday," Noah added. "Said the hall feels right again. Guess it's his now." "Nah," Noah said. "Guess it's ours." The boy moved to the door, keys rattling once. He turned the lock, then looked back. "You sure you don't need help?" "No," Harrison said. "Not today." Noah nodded a small salute without motion and left. The hall quieted again. Harrison set the broom aside and walked to the plaque. Morning light from the east window struck the glass just right, igniting the badge beneath it into a calm, steady glow. He could see his reflection there, older, smaller, but still standing. He was still cleaning the hall, he murmured, voice barely above breath, but this time they called him Sir. The words lingered soft as the dust still turning in the light. He straightened the frame once, not because it needed fixing, but because some gestures deserved repetition. A line from the radio carried through the silence, barely formed, almost prayerful. "Some honors don't come with ceremony." He nodded once, the motion both acceptance and farewell. The choir hummed one last refrain. Outside, the day widened, cars starting, doors opening, the world returning to itself. Inside the hall, the light grew until the badge reflection filled the frame. Then the door eased, closed, latch clicking gently into place. The choir's hum lingered a moment longer, then faded to stillness. The hall stayed open just long enough for sunlight to find the badge beneath the plaque, its reflection drifting across the floor, like a flag that finally rested. Still, the air carried the faint hum of the choir on the old radio, blending with the broom's slow rhythm, a sound of work that asked for no audience. Then, as Noah locked the doors, and the town began its quiet holiday, the proof of service remained in glass and memory, a name, a token, and the warmth that follows duty done without demand. He was still cleaning the hall, but this time they called him Sir. Some honors don't come with ceremony.